understand what we're doing, we've got 4 panelists from 4 key areas of importance for the voting when you consider your vote for representative. We got Superintendent Ranny Bledsoe. She'll be asking questions about education. We got Seleem Choudhury, who will be asking questions about health. We got Barbara Hatch, who will be asking questions about business and economy. And we got Police Chief Clem, who will be asking questions about public safety. I also will be asking questions as well that may or may not hit on those areas as we go into the evening. Bob South is an incumbent representative for St. Johnsbury. He was born in Bradford, Pennsylvania, and has lived in St. Johnsbury since 1994 with his wife and children. Bob has served on the Town Planning Commission since 2007. He is currently a corporator at Northeastern Vermont Regional Hospital and has been an active member of many different organizations in town. Now the question that I asked the candidates to mull over is the following. Bob South, why should you represent us in the Vermont legislature?
Are we using the mic or just?
You should use the mic, yeah, and you're gonna have to.
That was a question that I took quite a bit of time on trying to think logically about a good answer. And the one thing that I can say is that I have an open mind and I listen to my constituents. You can look over my last 3 terms in Montpelier that I've always had that. I've always had an open door. I've always taken personal phone calls. And I think that I do have that common sense approach to the issues that people have here in St. Johnsbury. And if you look at this side of the state versus the western side of the state, a lot of times we don't get heard. And that's one thing that I can say, that as being your state representative in Montpelier, that I'm not afraid to go and have those conversations with leadership that I feel affect St. Johnsbury and the Northeast Kingdom. And by doing that, I hope that I have proven to the voters that I can have those conversations. And we may agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, I can say that I've served the citizens well of St. Johnsbury. And you can look at some of the things that have happened in St. Johnsbury over the last 6 years with improvement in our water and sewer and some things that have gone on at the correctional center that's brought money into the town. So yeah, I think I've done a good job. I hope you think I have, and I look forward to serving you again.
Okay, just for the other candidates, if you were paying attention, that was 1.5 minutes. So there we go. Now we're going to move on to the next candidate, and that's Janssen Willhoit. Janssen Willhoit was raised on a family farm. He became the first college graduate in his family. His time mentoring prisoners in his early 20s ultimately inspired him to pursue a law degree in order to represent the underserved populations. He moved to Vermont with his wife in 2010 to study law at Vermont Law School. In 2012, after graduating Vermont Law School with honors, he and his wife moved to St. Johnsbury, where he works as a public defender at Wiley and Power. He has served as a youth leader at Grace United Methodist Church, and he and his wife are foster parents to local children. Janssen Willhoit, why should you represent us in the Vermont legislature?
Thank you. I should represent us in the Vermont legislature because we deserve better. We deserve a fresh approach to creating jobs, protecting those that we already have, and having access to affordable health care without excessive government control. Now, as already mentioned, I'm not a native to Vermont, but I did grow up on a small farm and learn the lessons of hard work and self-reliance that is so common to so many families here in St. Johnsbury. So my wife and I did move here in 2010 to Vermont to begin our careers and to raise a family here. And since that time, I'm proud to say that we are happy and so very blessed to call St. Johnsbury home, as I'm sure so many people here too feel the same way. I'm honored to serve our town as our public defender, as a leader for area youth, and also to serve as a foster parent for local children here in St. Johnsbury. But I also understand that it's becoming harder and harder for working families to stay here in Vermont because of high taxes and the lack of opportunity. So I should represent us in Montpelier because I have heard our concerns. And I understand that it's not Montpelier that creates jobs, but it's hard-working entrepreneurs and local business people here in St. Johnsbury that create jobs. By Montpelier getting out of the way and providing opportunity for those job creators to thrive. And I also understand that we have no greater resource in this state than our children. So I'm going to work hard each and every day so that all of our children have the opportunity to reach the American dream right here in Vermont. Thank you, and I do appreciate your support.
Okay, thank you, Janssen. Next, we're going to come back around to Scott Beck. Scott Beck was born in St. Johnsbury. After earning a BA in political science at the University of Washington, he was commissioned in the United States Navy and went on to serve as a naval flight officer. He was awarded 2 Air Medals for aerial combat, a Navy Commendation Medal, and 2 Navy Achievement Medals for his service. Upon earning his master's degrees in mathematics and social science education, he returned to St. Johnsbury in 1999. He is a teacher at St. Johnsbury Academy. Scott has served as the executive director of the St. Johnsbury Chamber of Commerce, chair of the Downtown Improvement Commission, and is a member of the St. Johnsbury School District Budget Committee. Scott and his wife Joelle opened a bookstore downtown St. Johnsbury in 2005. Scott Beck, why should you represent us in Vermont legislature?
Thank you. I think I would be a really good choice this year for legislator. The storm clouds that are brewing in this state they're quite large. We have huge issues with state budgets, education budgets. Money is becoming very tight, and the demographic picture is not pretty. This state is not retaining its youth, largely because of job opportunities. And Vermont, in many ways, has become a state that is not attractive to employers. And we badly need employers if we're going to retain our youth. I feel like I'm a good choice this year because I think I know I have the creativity, I have the experience in economic development, and I have a broad experience in education. And that's really where the money is. And I think you really need somebody in Montpelier that can go into this knowing exactly what the headwinds are in education, knowing what the headwinds are in the economy, and finding some creative ways to make this state one where it's attractive to young people, and it's also attractive to people as they grow older and they can stay here. It's very challenging. It's quite a mess right now. Our family income is going down. Our spending at state level has gone up at 3 times the rate of inflation the last, since 2008. And this is going to need, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of creativity, and it's also going to take somebody that can really work hard with the other side of the state and the other aisle to get this thing going in the right direction again.
Thank you, Scott. Next is Representative Michelle Fay. She grew up in Shoreham, Vermont, on her family's dairy farm. She graduated from the University of Vermont with a bachelor's degree in sociology and holds a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University. She moved to St. Johnsbury in 1997 and lives in the village with her husband and 2 daughters. She has served as the executive director of the nonprofit organization Umbrella since 2001. She is a board member of the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence and is an appointed member of the Vermont Council on Homelessness. Michelle was first elected to the legislature in 2012 and serves on the House Judiciary Committee. Representative Fay, why should we support you in the Vermont legislature?
I first ran for state rep 2 years ago because I felt St. Johnsbury deserved a more active and engaged representation. As a mother, executive director of Umbrella, and a Vermonter with deep roots to the community. I believe I bring a unique and valuable perspective to the policy conversations that happen in Montpelier. I was very honored to serve St. Johnsbury for these past 2 years, and I'm actually very proud of the work that we accomplished. For starters, this year we passed the largest investment in transportation infrastructure in Vermont's history. That's $665 million for our roads, bridges, airports, rail, bike ped, every way you can get around, which are critical components to our economic development portfolio. I also worked extensively on the pretrial services bill, which takes a huge step in the right direction to make our justice system more responsive to the needs of the community, both in terms of containing the costs of our out of control incarceration, and also just making our community safer by matching the right interventions to the crime. This year, the legislature also made an important progress in supporting business with the jobs bill, which was S220. This improves small business access to capital and creates a one-stop shop, an online portal that supports business development and expansion. Now, over the next 2 years, the legislature is going to face some tough issues, but far too often the challenges we face are presented as either or. You have to pick a side. These are false choices. The truth is, we need businesses to thrive and workers to be paid a reasonable wage in the process. We need to protect Vermont's natural beauty and also allow for sustainable development so people can afford to live here. I approach issues with curiosity, thoughtfulness, and openness. I've been willing to rock the boat when the policies that come across the table are slanted toward the other side of the state. I've been a strong voice for people who don't typically have a seat at the decision-making table. Complicated challenges require us to dig deep, to reflect on the failures and successes of people who've come before us, and even to take some calculated risks to try new approaches. I'm asking for your vote so I can keep working for smart, long-term solutions to keep Vermont and St. Johnsbury moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I was remiss in introducing myself. A little rush to get into the questions. My name is Dana Gray. I'm the executive editor of the Caledonian-Record, who is sponsoring tonight's candidates forum. So now we are going to meet our panelists, and we're going to get started with the first question. Let me introduce to you Superintendent Ranny Bledsoe. She is in her 3rd year of Superintendent of Schools in St. Johnsbury. Prior to her service here, she was a middle school math teacher, math coach, and headmaster at the Charlestown High School in Boston. Prior to this, she worked in higher education in Venezuela, Bard College, New York University, and the University of Louisville. She earned a PhD in mathematics from the New York University. Okay, Superintendent Bledsoe.
Thank
Your
you.
first question. Oh, I'm sorry.
You're asking a question?
You're gonna ask the question, but I want to tell you who you're asking it to get it started. Bob was the lucky winner twice. So he's going to be the first candidate to get this question from you.
Okay, Bob, what is your position on school choice and the roles of public and independent schools in the education of our children?
I definitely support school choice. Last year, when the education bill was moving its way through committee and out onto the House floor, there was a big push among some of our colleagues over there to do away with school choice. And I can say that all of the representatives from the Northeast Kingdom were very supportive of school choice, and we worked hard, and actually that bill got ordered to lie on the floor, which means the bill never come, and that we never even debated it on the floor. They pulled the bill right there on the floor, so that was a lot of work that the area representatives did, and I would definitely support that for school choice. And the second part of your question?
The roles of public and independent schools in the education of our children.
Oh, they play a huge role, and you can see that in the independent schools we have here in the Northeast Kingdom, on the role that they play, and the students that come out of those independent schools, and where they are able to go on. And I know myself. I have my first grandchild, and we've already started talking about what school she's going to be attending, and so yeah, absolutely support it.
Thank you, Superintendent. I too also support school choice. Our community has a rich tradition of a wonderful, vast array of significant and contributing independent schools in our area that I'll continue to support. I too, though my kids are still at your school, well, I understand you have all the schools, but at least the St. J, at the St. J school. I take pride in the fact of knowing that when they do reach that age, that they have the ability and the opportunity to go to the academy. But I also understand the fact that even though the bills did lie, they're not dead yet. There's still a growing move on the other side of the state to consolidate schools. And there is the growing talk that as the bigger the school, the less the cost. But I think that as we're learning more and more, the bigger the school does not mean that means it's cheaper. That means more bureaucracy, more control at the top level, not here at the local level. And that's why I do think that as residents, we want to have greater control of our local schools, and that means keeping that independence. And so I am someone not only that would support that independent spirit, but also to continue to work towards and fighting against greater collaboration and of bringing larger pools together of our students. Thank you.
I support allowing Vermont towns to decide how they want to deliver their education to their children. The model that St. Johnsbury has chosen, public schooling K through 8 and school choice in high school, I think works very well for St. Johnsbury. We've built it into a nice little arrangement. All my children have gone to the St. Johnsbury school, received a wonderful education there, and 3 of them have gone on to the academy and equally as happy as what's going on there. The big issue in Montpelier, of course, is consolidation of governance. And what that really is code words for the state trying to take over that local control. Because once school districts and towns lose governance, it's a very vertical, slippery slope at that point. And so I do not support consolidation of governance. And I don't buy into the state's argument anyhow that it's going to save a dime. I really don't think it will. And I think that towns should be able to choose their model. If their model is inefficient and it's costly, but they feel like it's the best model for their children,
10 seconds.
then fine, so be it. They can pay for the expenses of running that inefficient model, even though they believe it to be the best for their children.
So the issue of the role of independent schools and the consolidation bill are separate in my mind, and I'm assuming there might be a question about consolidation later. So the independent school bill that was ordered to lie was looking to add additional responsibilities and mandates onto independent schools, and Bob's correct that the entire Northeast Kingdom delegation fought against that. I think, I have a ton of respect for the history and heritage of our hybrid system here in the Northeast Kingdom. On the other hand, I'm a huge proponent of public education, and I wouldn't go so far as to say that I would advocate for the expansion of school choice at this point. I think the jury is still out in terms of some of the reports I've read around the success of charter schools and independent schools. Once you actually, what's the word I'm looking for? When you take out the fact that the socioeconomic level of students at those schools tend to be higher, their success is actually no better than our public schools. And my concern is that a move to pulling a lot of parents and families out of public schools leaves the kids in the school who most need to be integrated in their community in a meaningful way. And it brings the parents who are most likely to have the resources and time to be engaged in their public school out to other communities. So what we have here is working very well. I'm not sure I'm ready to go on the record to support expansion.
Thank you very much.
Next question is going to come from Seleem Choudhury. He is the Chief Nursing Officer and Vice President of Professional Services at Northeastern Vermont Regional Hospital. He was born and raised in the United Kingdom. He moved to the Northeast Kingdom in the fall of 2013. He has over 20 years experience with hospital care, and throughout his career has maintained a balance of clinical and administrative roles. Seleem has worked within the healthcare system of the United Kingdom and United States and has experienced what both systems have had to offer. Go ahead, Seleem.
Thank you, and good evening. My first question for you is, when it comes to health and healthcare matters in our region and state, what are your priority concerns?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Sure. When it comes to health and healthcare matters in our region and state, what are your priority concerns?
Thank you. My priority is for having greater access to not only affordable, but also quality health care, then without rationing not only, what offers you have, but also not limiting those sources to those that are in the greatest need. But I also believe that the current system that we have in place in terms of Shumlin care is not going to be the way that we're going to have affordable and accessible health care. I do believe that a model that does help to provide a greater access is through competition and being able to open up the market, so not only that we don't have just one provider, but also an array of providers that we can actually have ability to decide who we're going to get our insurance from, but also we should be able to cross state lines too and also receive health care from insurance providers outside of the state of Vermont. And I also think a way that's also going to help to reduce the costs associated is if we do have tort reform, and also supporting innovative measures that still enable the physicians to do the great things that they can do, but still with not jeopardizing the actual treatment or care that they're receiving. Thank you.
Okay. I am concerned about the cost of health care in Vermont. It seems to go up much faster than the rate of inflation every year. And I am very interested in pursuing healthcare delivery options that use competition in the marketplace to hold down costs. But actually my biggest fear regarding healthcare in the Northeast Kingdom, and a lot of it goes back to my time when I was at the Chamber of Commerce, is that we simply aren't attracting the doctors and dentists that we need to service the population that we have right now. It was a common complaint that we're just, for a lot of different reasons, one being the economics of the situation, we're really having a tough time. I speak to some people in the health profession that are just on, to some degree, pins and needles. What's going to happen if we lose this doctor? We have no idea if we're going to be attractive and recruit somebody else to come in. And that's a pretty scary thing when you look at the demographics of our area, that we are getting older, and I'm not even sure we're going to have the people that are willing to come here to treat the people that we have at the rate we're going.
My priority is simply universal, accessible, affordable access for everyone in the community to healthcare. And I've worked with a number of people who lost their health care as a result of having their health care connected to their employment. That actually happened to my family, and I was uninsured for 3 years. So I'm not sure that the free market has always served everyone all that well. And there is actually a fair amount of rationing that takes place in the free market. I'm really interested in a system that puts the planning for the care firmly in the hands of the doctor and the patient. And for those relationships to build through preventive care, which right now can be tough to come by with high deductible plans that are kind of the norm. I think one of the ways that we can approach the problem that Scott addressed around attracting and retaining healthcare providers is to take the part out of the business that they hate, which is managing multiple payers. We had several healthcare providers from the Northeast Kingdom, Sharon Fine and some pediatricians from up north, testify in front of the health committee, and they talked about the fact that having multiple payers with each having their own drug formulary and each having their own quality insurance plans and audits required, it was a ton of bureaucracy. And I think streamlining that bureaucracy is going to allow providers to do what they went to school to do.
Thank you for the question. And I'm going to take this a little bit of a different turn. What I see here in the Northeast Kingdom is we have a great campus up on Hospital Hill with the facility, the hospital we have here. And then they brought in the cancer treatment center just below the hospital that was able to help a lot of people in the Northeast Kingdom to be able to get their treatments there instead of having to travel to Dartmouth or to Burlington or whatever. And one thing that I've been saying over the last 6 years is what I would like to see happen here and to be added to the campus up there is a VA clinic. Right now, you've got to go to Littleton or you've got to go to White River Junction. Our veterans, and we have a number of veterans in this community, and especially since the last couple of wars over in Iraq and Afghanistan, we have a lot of veterans here that need to be traded. And instead of them having to travel and their families having that hardship to have to travel to White River Junction or to Burlington or to over to Littleton or wherever, I know that I've been a big advocate for Bernie Sanders and Peter Welch to work with the staff here and to work with Paul Bankston to see about opening up a VA clinic here in St. Johnsbury. I think that that's something we need in this community, and I know that that's something that I've been, and I've actually had many conversations with Paul Bankston and Peter Welch about. And again, like we said, we can talk all day long about the healthcare bill that's been going through the last few years, what it's going to cost, what it's going to look like. And I've already been on record, and I'll go on record right now in saying that if we do not have a funding mechanism by the second week of January, we were in a meeting with the Speaker of the House, and the Speaker of the House said, we have to have that to see what it looks like, because we don't know what it looks like. It could be,
10 seconds.
It could be so costly that there's no way I would support it. So if it's not there in the first 2 weeks of the session, the Speaker has said it's dead.
Okay. Thank you for those answers. Next, we're going to come to Barbara Hatch. She's going to be asking her question of Scott Beck. Barbara Hatch is the Executive Director of the St. Johnsbury Chamber of Commerce. She grew up in Massachusetts and attended Syracuse University, where she received a BA in History and Psychology. Her career as an advertising and marketing professional spanned several well-known firms in Boston. In 2003, she moved to St. Johnsbury with her family. She became active as a community volunteer. She served as the Catamount Arts Annual Benefit Auction Coordinator for 2 years, which led to her interest with the St. Johnsbury's Chamber of Commerce. Barbara's husband, Zach, is employed by Weidman, and he is a co-founder of the Kingdom Tap Room in downtown St. Johnsbury. Barbara, your question, please.
What is your view on the future impact of regional EB5 projects' influence in St. Johnsbury on indirect and induced job creation and/or loss?
Okay, well, the EB5 program is certainly ongoing, and it's getting larger, it seems like every time I pick up the newspaper. Unfortunately, right now, I think most of the impact from the EB5 projects at Burke and Jay and the airport up in Coventry and Newport are going to be indirect for St. Johnsbury. That doesn't mean I don't think that there's a tremendous opportunity for St. Johnsbury. While people will not ski, or since we have no mountain, they're not going to ski here. The people that work at Burke Mountain and the people that work at Jay and in this area, they're going to need a place to live. St. Johnsbury has always been a population center, always been an economic center, and I think that as far as this development that Mr. Stenger's group is concerned, that is how we need to position ourselves as. That is, we are the community where people live. We have arts, culture, great schools, commerce. We're at the intersection of state and federal highways, and I think we need to position ourselves and to market ourselves to take advantage of the situation that our position, which is that we are a great place to live, and these workers would, I think, would be very well to live in St. Johnsbury.
I was actually going to go the housing direction as well, although with a slightly different angle, which is that the Northeast Kingdom has some of the lowest numbers and access to affordable housing in the state. So we have a problem we need to kind of get ahead of and be getting more information from Mr. Stenger around what the anticipated growth in jobs will be. I know when I participated in a planning process a couple years ago, Mr. Stenger said, it's not all coming at once, it'll come in waves, you'll have time to anticipate it, but it takes a while to develop affordable housing, and so we need to be getting on that sooner than later. I would also say that St. Johnsbury, as the population center, in conjunction with the educational resources we have, ought to be in the lead around workforce training for the folks that need to populate those jobs. And in fact, one of the things I've been doing at Umbrella is trying to combine the needs of a low-income population with the economic development needs of the EB5 project through a program called Cornucopia that we launched in Newport, which trains women in transition on culinary arts and hospitality skills to position them better to compete for those jobs that are opening up at Jay Peak and in the rest of the region.
A lot of what has already been said, I could just echo, but one thing is that they're going to be part-time jobs at the hotel up at Jay. So yeah, we'll be able to, our citizens be able to apply for those positions and hopefully work there. But the one thing is, it's like in Burke, it's skiing. Well, when it's dark, they can't ski. So this is where St. Johnsbury, I think, really has a good leg up, because the building that we're in right now with the arts, our library, our museum, some of the restaurants, we have good quality restaurants right here. We have a beautiful hotel down the street. So I think that we really need to market St. Johnsbury, and now's the time to do it before that hotel gets done, and to be able to say at the end of your day, come to St. J. And I think that we have a huge opportunity here that we need to really dig deep in. I know Scott did a video when he was on the chamber about some of the area here in St. Johnsbury, and it was like, I think only 1 or 2 seasons.
It was
Winter. And so I think we really need to take that, and we need to work on that, get it on all 4 seasons, and really promote St. Johnsbury, because we do have a gem right here. And I think that would attract a lot of these people from Connecticut and Mass that are going to be coming up here.
I agree. Bob is right that the vast majority of these jobs are part-time jobs. So while it would be wonderful if all of these individuals could come and buy homes here in St. Johnsbury, most likely they won't. And so really the economic benefit, it is going back to the greater tourism ability. That while, again, people are going to be skiing there, the place to go eat, the place to get culture is here in St. Johnsbury. So hopefully they'll be going to the tap room that you're a part of, or Bailiwicks or other places here to eat, and also stay at our hotels as well.
Okay, next up to ask questions is Police Chief Clem Houde. Chief Houde was raised on a farm in Passumpsic. He comes from a large family. He is a St. Johnsbury Academy graduate who began a career in law enforcement in 1989 for the Caledonian County Sheriff's Office. In 1992, he joined the St. Johnsbury Police Department and was promoted to chief there in 2011. Chief Houde, you're going to ask your first question to Representative Michelle Fay.
Recent trends in sentencing show a reduction in jail time to serve for convictions of serious crimes. Some reasons for this are that jails are full and the high cost of housing incarcerated inmates. Do you support building more jails with stiffer jail time, or follow the recent trends with sentences served more in the community?
I'm definitely not in support of building more jails. What I do support is taking a look at restorative justice practices for nonviolent offenders in particular, and leaving the jails for the offenders who really shouldn't be walking the streets and pose a risk to our community. I think that's actually as much a trend that I'm hoping to see go, rather than sentences that are commuted or that are shortened based on the lack of space. I think you need to match, as I said before, match the response and the intervention to the severity of the crime. So we don't have this as much in Vermont. We don't have a lot of low-level drug offenders going to jail. That's a national problem that fills up the jails, but there certainly are certainly are some low-level offenses that have people in jail. And in fact, I don't know what the census is right now, but there's typically over 100 people in jail for lack of housing. And we're paying between, if it's a man, between around $60-something thousand a year to house them. If it's a woman, it's $86,000 a year to house them. And that is criminal as far as I'm concerned. It's a terrible use of our money.
And thank you for the question. I, of course, sit on corrections and institutions, so the prisons, we've had many discussions about this. And for one is, we're going to have to face the fact we are going to have to build a new facility. The Burlington facility right now that the women are in is terrible. It's fallen down. There's many issues with it. So to answer your question is, yes, we're going to have to build a new facility. Does that mean we're going to load it up the first day it's open and incarcerate, 500 more people? Probably not. But the fact is that we do have people in the correctional center right now that could get out but have nowhere to live. And when I say that is, they go back to the community they came from. So here in St. Johnsbury, if there's X number of inmates ready to get out, we don't let them out just to put them in St. Johnsbury. They go back to the community they're from. So that is an issue statewide where many places do not have adequate housing for these individuals to go back to. And I agree, they should not just be released into St. Johnsbury when maybe they're from the other side of the state.
10 seconds.
And as far as the offenses, yeah, we have a work camp. I think we need more work camps. That way that will open up more spots in the correctional centers for those individuals that need to be there.
Thank you. Well, I also do agree that the answer is in building more jails and putting more people in jail. But obviously we still have to decide whether or not who are the individuals that really they aren't safe to be in our community, as opposed to those that really do need to be in jail. And Michelle is right. The fact of the matter is we can't afford to lock everyone up that commits a crime because it is overly expensive, and so is building new jails. But what we can do is utilize the resources we currently do have in our communities to have restorative justice, to have rehabilitation, to utilize probation and parole, and at least afford the opportunities for people to get over their addictions and other ailing problems before they go to prison.
I think as far as the prisons are concerned, I think Vermont needs to assess, reassess, continue to assess whether this practice of sending our prisoners out of state is cost effective or not, and also whether it leads to increased recidivism for these people. I read a stat the other day that said that 75 to 80% of people that commit violent crimes did not graduate from high school. And 75 to 80% of people that are violent offenders that are released from prison become repeat offenders within 5 years. So that's pretty real. So I think we need to be very careful with how we treat violent offenders and make sure that we keep our communities safe. Those that are nonviolent offenders, we certainly need to look at as many creative ways as possible to get them back on track and to get them back into our communities and being productive citizens.
Thank you. Okay, it's my turn to ask a question. Earlier this week, we ran a story about a request for a Dunkin' Donuts in Derby, and the story was about the Act 250 Commission finding fault in the color scheme. It was too orange for Dunkin' Donuts. So clearly, Act 250 does take into great account the aesthetics of a proposal. My question for you is, would you vote to introduce consideration of economic benefits into the Act 250 land use and regulatory process so that job and revenue creation can have equal consideration as potential adverse environmental effects do now? That question, I believe, should go to Bob.
Thank you. I would say right off the cuff that anything that I can do to help streamline and help promote business, and if that means taking it Act 250 and streamlining it, pulling the pin, blowing it up, doing whatever we got to do, that's me. I wouldn't have a problem with that. I think Act 250 does have, as he said, you know, they're going to argue over the color, if it's too orange or too blue or too black. That's what gives Vermont that bad rap. And I definitely think Act 250 does have its good points, but I think in a time like that, on something like that, definitely I think it hinders what it was really meant to be, and absolutely. But again, it's all what's in the devil of the details. So on a bill like that, you've got to read the whole thing front to back, back to front. And, you know, yeah, I would support anything that would help support businesses, but as far as introducing a bill or having a bill introduced, I definitely would want to review it and do my due diligence with my constituents.
Thank you. Yes, anything to streamline the Act 250 process and also to take into account economic benefits, not solely environmental benefits, that are important, because while, again, which I believe all Vermonters by and large do feel that it's important to preserve our natural viability, we also want to preserve our economic viability as well. And so if that means, again, finding a process that actually incentivizes and helps businesses to thrive, and even if it means a color or a shade that might not be popular to a certain board, but really is what is going to bring in business, then let's have the color. But I do think that by and large, there were great opponents when Act 250 was established. But again, it's an old bill, and like anything else, sometimes things pass at their prime. And so in order to help bring business to Vermont and keep the business we have, we need to look at new approaches before we start limiting what businesses can do to start here in Vermont.
Well, I'm all for streamlining Act 250. I think it's a huge deterrent to business on this side of the river, especially relative to our neighbors. As far as the color and little small things like that, which, I mean, I think let's strip out of Act 250 what can be decided at the local level using local zoning and local sign ordinances and local color ordinances if we have those types of things. But I think that would, if Act 250 is to that extent getting into business, then we need to separate the local stuff and let the local communities decide what's too orange.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm not, I cannot advance myself as any kind of an expert on Act 250, but I have had a little experience with practicality bumping heads with regulation in terms of the building I work in now. I think because of, it's not an Act 250 issue, but a historical tax credit issue, I think, or a downtown issue that required these windows to be put into the Odine Hale building where my office is that are lovely and were incredibly expensive, but I have dust coming in and my fingers are freezing in the winter. So they're not, the practicality factor is not there, and the cost to heat that building is outrageous because of those windows. So yeah, I definitely have concerns about willy-nilly development. That, I mean, you can drive through towns where you can tell they were thoughtful about the process, and that actually helps their economic picture by attracting tourists and just whatever. It looks planful, as opposed to some towns, including some kind of close to us, that look like, there wasn't a lot of thought put into the planning. So moderation is the key.
Thank you. And now Superintendent Bledsoe with her second question, please.
Okay.
Okay. What is your perspective on Vermont's financial structure for supporting education, and what reforms would you suggest to relieve the burden of educational tax on the taxpayer?
Our state funding system while again, in theory, was something that I think was trying to equalize access to quality education statewide, again, that's another example of something that's past its prime. And as I've gone door to door speaking to folks here in our town, and which I think we're all just horribly aware of the fact of the process we had last year, and trying to pass our school budget, the concerns amongst voters by and large is they just can't pay any more. It's not that they don't want to educate their children, but to put it on the backs of their property tax is not the answer. And so I do believe that we have to look at other avenues and ways to finance. But I also think that if we're going to utilize a statewide system, then there has to be a cap to all the schools as well. To our credit, which I appreciate actually your presentation on Monday, showing the difference in comparison of our town and its budget as opposed to other towns that are also receiving communities as well, whereas we're paying $14,000 to $15,000 per student, they're spending $18,000 to $20,000. When we're doing the math and we're all out of the same pot, we just can't afford that. And so I do think it's going to require fiscal discipline at all levels. And again, if that means that certain districts are not going to be fiscally responsible as we have tried so desperately to do here in St. Johnsbury, then I do think that we're going to have to put a cap on really what can be paid. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, with school financing, St. Johnsbury, we need to be really careful because of the Brigham decision. I think we non-residential and residential property taxes, we contribute about $6.4 million to the state education fund, and we get back 12.3. So that aspect of school funding, we definitely want to keep in place. That is definitely to our advantage. The problem that we face is that everybody seems like statewide, and we're really the exception here. Most schools statewide have seen a reduction in students of 20 to 30%, and they haven't reduced their expenses. In fact, in a lot of cases, they've gone up. And these schools are getting terribly, terribly expensive, in some cases in excess of $20,000. And that finds its way back into our wallet. And so the state really needs to take a close look at Act 60 and 68 and make sure that it was never intended to be a mechanism whereby schools would just irresponsibly spend money that is really unnecessary and hoist that onto other communities. But that is what has happened. And so we need to look at that and make sure that that we're paying our fair share, but that everybody's being responsible and not just St. Johnsbury.
Yeah, at the end, well actually in last year's session, the education finance bill included some measures in the House version that would encourage communities to feel a little more of the pain when they decided to make those choices to spend more per student than other places. And that's things like once they're above a certain percentage, I think it was 125% of the state average, their tax rate would double for that additional part. And so we're lowering that threshold down so that it's getting a little closer to the average. Some of those measures passed the Senate and some didn't. But this is actually where the school consolidation comes into play a little bit. Because some of those small schools that are costing us so much, and that they're not all small schools that are costing a lot, but they're struggling to figure out how to provide the education at a reasonable cost. And so that's going to be part of the conversation about what to do with those small schools. The other issue I want to point out is that Vermont is horribly over-reliant on property taxes to fund our education. So the national average, I think, is that 40% of education is funded through property taxes, and in Vermont, we're at 68%. So it's clear that we need to rebalance where we're looking for the revenue to support education. And that might be in looking at moving toward a more income-based approach so that people are paying what they're able to pay.
I think there's a couple pieces to this. Is definitely our property taxes, as we've all heard here, door to doors that I've gone to, people can't pay no more. They're done. Their wallets are tapped out. So one is we need to address that. And it's been talked a little bit about here about this, the schools that overspend. and we're trying to lower that down to put more of a burden on that. It's working, but not as quickly as it should, so maybe we need to move that a little more to really, hold those school districts accountable, and those residents in those towns hold those school districts accountable. The other thing is the unfunded mandates. If the state is going to mandate something, then the state needs to step up and pay for it. And I'm not saying pay for it on the property taxes, but we need to do that, because when we send unfunded mandates to the towns for the schools to implement, we're not giving them a check for that. And if we're going to do that, that's just like the federal government. They give us unfunded mandates, and the school doesn't get a check in the mail from the federal government that you got to do this. So that's one thing that I'm going to, if I get reelected by the residents of St. Johnsbury, I'm going to be a big opponent, or pushing for, if we're going to do mandates, we're going to fund them, or we're not going to do the mandates.
Mr. Seleem, your second question, please.
Thank you. So this is a follow-up question. Some of you answer it already, but I want to get specific answers. And it's, what do you think Vermont and this region can do to attract healthcare professionals here? Not just physicians, but nurses and laboratory techs and so on.
Wow, that's a tough question. The biggest thing that I heard when I talked to medical professionals and trying to get families and spouses to come up here is they just didn't like the retail offerings that we had. They would come to St. Johnsbury, they were urban creatures, and this was just not, rural did not appeal to them. So I think if that's the starting point, then I think what really needs to happen is we need to market this area and really pursue those people that are inclined to this lifestyle. I remember a couple years ago somebody ran for Senate in Vermont, and I remember he spoke somewhere and he said that the first question they asked on an employee survey, all these questions, one of the questions was, do you enjoy outdoor recreation? And if the answer was no to that question, they didn't pursue that person any longer. And maybe that's what we need to do, is maybe we need to go to our strengths, which are outdoor education, beauty, the environment, and really market ourselves to those doctors and those dentists and healthcare professionals that are really attracted to that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, this question actually links into other issues. I mean, education, the cost of education. I think one of the things that that is hard that ties in with healthcare reform is the incredible debt that medical professionals, when they get done with school, they have to deal with, and maybe they're looking for a place that's going to pay a little bit higher. I don't know. Like, that's something where I think we could incentivize healthcare providers to choose our neck of the woods. In conjunction with the issues that Scott just mentioned. I'm not as concerned with retail. I think actually having jobs for the partners is probably as important. So having a really diverse economic situation here where the partners of medical professionals can see themselves developing a career. And that ties into economic development as well. It's complicated, but I said this at our last forum, I think that we need to stop talking about how hard it is here and really talk about how great it is here, because it is.
The one thing that I would push for and would probably be able to look at in more depth is, we passed a bill that the governor wanted about college students. If they said that they would stay in Vermont for X number of years, they would get 1 or 2 years of their college paid for. And I think we could do that on the healthcare side. I think we've got UVM on the other side of the state in their medical facility. I think we need to approach those students that are Vermont born, bred, and raised, that are doctors, nurses, lab techs, and to be able to entice them to stay home. So yeah, they have their college bill, but do the same for them. Say, hey, listen, if you sign up and say you'll stay home, we'll knock 2 years off it, and that will be our doctors, our nurses, our lab techs, and so that would one piece that I would like to look at.
I also agree with many of the statements that have already been made, that it is a multifaceted situation. Not only the fact of there is a certain type of individual that is attracted to the Northeast Kingdom, but also there is going to be a greater incentive too of a broad diversity of not only obviously of being attracted to our outdoor activities, but also having the belief that you actually are going to be able to stay here and survive here. So that have opportunities for job development, a place to have a home, a place to raise your children, and actually be able to afford to stay here, even though you might be paid well, but also you do have that great debt. And so that's why I do think on the business side of things and economic development, that is also a critical point there. And that is a more holistic approach of looking at ways to incentivize people and businesses and opportunity for citizens in the region. And that means having greater tax relief and having greater opportunity to employment and getting rid of unfunded mandates and all the things that we know are really plaguing our environmental culture today.
Okay, thank you. Barbara, please.
In comparison to neighboring communities within a 1-hour drive, St. Johnsbury's housing cost is below average. What do you attribute this to, and do you declare it an asset or a detriment to economic development?
That's Michelle.
Yeah. I'm not sure how to answer that. I think I certainly know that there are a lot of houses on the market, and I know that that's driving down the cost. I mean, I'll say that I know of several young families who are able to move to our community, and that was a big reason why. They looked at how far their dollar would go in buying a house, and they saw that it would go pretty far here in St. Johnsbury, and so it's attractive that way. I mean, it's concerning as well that people who are trying to sell their houses are having a hard time. You know, my tendency is to want to frame it positively and use it as part of our marketing efforts. Again, at the other forum, I think I talked about how I lived for 3 years in Boulder, Colorado, and one of the reasons I came back to my home state, in addition to love, was that we could not possibly have purchased a home. And I was making a reasonable salary, not great, but a good starting salary for a young woman. And starting homes there were, $250,000, $275,000. So we started getting the real estate brochures, and I was looking at my dream house, which is now Maureen Henning's on the end of the street, and it was, at that time, it was like $167,000, and I thought, that's insane, let's go. So I'd like to sort of frame it positively as much as we can.
Well, I think, like Michelle said, I think this could be, you could look at this a couple different ways, but the first thing I would say is that it shows that the recession, where we're at in the recession, it shows that, Vermont didn't get hit as hard as other states did in the country with the recession. We're definitely not out of the recession. I think it's taken Vermont longer to come out of the recession, which I think that's good because it does keep the housing prices down, but I think at the end that it also hurts the grand list here in the town. As the grand list drops, then there goes the property taxes. So I think it's a double-edged sword, and I'm hoping that as Vermont and as the nation comes out of this recession, that we can do that equal balance, because I think that is the niche of Vermont, that housing is cheap, and but we gotta do it sensibly.
The reality is, though, you're right. When you look at on our streets, we have many houses that are for sale, that are still for sale, and the prices have gone down. For what it's worth, my own family was able to buy a house last year, and I never thought I could ever do that on a public defense salary, but we were able to because prices were so inexpensive. But that being said, too, it is concerning. That it doesn't necessarily equate to that things aren't so bad and we have a cheaper cost of living, but because we have people that are leaving and trying to get out that unfortunately aren't able to do so, This makes me think of this summer, in fact, when I was, I wish I could remember the name of the road now, but I was going up Pleasant Street, and there's a road on the, if you're going up Pleasant off of Concord, it's the first one on the left. If someone in the audience remembers it, they can tell me what road it is. But every single house on the road was for sale. Every single one. It's like 8 houses. I went up, my wife and I were actually walking door to door that day, and my wife was speaking to the young woman who, they were about the same age as us, had children about the same age as well. And the woman, unfortunately, she had said that her husband had recently lost his job, couldn't get another job, and she had a job, but simply they loved here, they loved the school, but they simply couldn't afford to be here anymore. But then they felt strapped because they're like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this house either. And so it is very concerning. And so it means we're going to have to look at a lot of different issues to solve these problems.
The recession has, and the lack of recovery or slow recovery, whatever you want to call it, has certainly aggravated the housing issue in this area. But it really is a lot deeper than that. In the last 40 years, the population of Caledonia County has increased by 20%. St. Johnsbury is the only town in Caledonia County that's lost population during that same period of time. We've lost about 400 people, about 6%. And that's what it is. When you have structures and you have fewer people to live in those structures, it's going to hurt your housing values, and you're not going to climb. And if you do climb, you're not going to climb as much as the surrounding towns. So it's maybe more of a town issue than it is a Montpelier issue, but for a variety of different reasons, St. Johnsbury is not attractive to people that are locating to this area or relocating in this area as other communities are. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think we need to understand it's a population thing. It's not a recession thing or a job thing. It's population.
Thank you. Now is Chief Clem Houde with his second question.
All Vermont property owners pay a portion of their property tax to the Vermont State Police for law enforcement coverage throughout the state. In towns like St. Johnsbury that have their own police department, there is currently no refund or rebate for those funds that are paid to the state of Vermont. Do you believe that there should be some type of reimbursement to taxpayers with their own municipal or county police coverage?
Wow. Yeah, I did, absolutely. You know, we sit here and we talk about the budget. The budget deficit this year is going to be over $100 million. It was just announced on Monday that Blue Cross Blue Shield is going up 20% on the health care for the state employees. So there's another $20 million onto the $100 million hole. So my heart says, yeah, I would love to see the state kick back to the towns for the town's local police departments. But again, the more we spend, the more our taxes, the more money is coming out of our pockets. So if we could find a way to do it and do it without adding an additional burden on to the taxpayers, I would say yes.
Absolutely. And again, going back to the property tax burden, that is what I've heard from nearly everyone as I go door to door. Is again, we can't afford to pay any more. And so when we look at a town like St. Johnsbury, where then we're paying to the Vermont State Police, but also we're paying for the services of your police force. And then we're looking at around Caledonia County as well. We have other towns and municipalities that do the same thing. Then essentially those taxpayers are paying for those services twice. And not again, and not minimizing obviously the work that's done by the Vermont State Police. But again, I think it could be looked at proportionally. And again, just thinking of myself as our public defender, I would venture to assume, at least in terms of the St. Johnsbury cases I'm dealing with myself, more came out of your office than they came out of Vermont State Police. So again, if those are the cases that are being investigated and handled here locally, and those funds are already going towards paying for our police service, then by all means, if we can find a way to give some relief to property tax owners, we should do so.
if communities are receiving a disproportionate amount of protection from state troopers because they choose not to have their own police force, then they absolutely should pay a bigger part of that bill. It is kind of, it seems a common sense thing. I don't think that needs to increase the budget, but I mean, if your line of defense is state troopers and you rely on them exclusively, then I think communities that do that should pay for that.
I tend to agree. I mean, the only thing that came to mind is I know that the state police offers backup and certainly takes the lead in some major crimes, and so I'd want to maybe explore if there was a way to sort of meet in the middle, to take a look at maybe historical usage and make sure that we didn't shoot ourselves in the foot by not having that backup of state police available to us. But certainly it was news to me, and it makes a lot of sense to take a look at it.
I'll take one more question from the audience and head back up to the panel. Yes, please state your name.
I'm Joseph Luck. I write for the News Inc. at Linden State College, and I'd like to ask all the candidates, if you were the only candidate elected, 2 seats or candidates from your party, how would you try to cross party lines and get along with the other electee?
Well, I have to say Vermont is unique, I would say, from talking to colleagues in other legislatures, that's really the norm in our state house. We routinely work together on issues. I worked with Vicki Strong from Albany on a bill about rape victims' rights, and the most effective legislators find ways to work together. There certainly are some major ideological divides that come up, but in particular, in a 2-seat district, and Bob can actually speak to this as someone who was sharing the district with a member of the other party, here's what I'll say. Everyone I met when I went to the legislature, with maybe a couple of exceptions, it was clear to me they were there with the best interests of Vermonters at heart, and they just go about it from different ways. So that's how we work.
And Michelle's right on, because as myself and Gary Reese, when Gary and I were both in office together, that's one thing that Gary and I did is we would always communicate with ourselves during the day, things that may be happening that he hears about or I hear about, and we would talk about it. And that goes with all the House members in the Northeast Kingdom. Lee LaRock sitting in this audience. Lee and I served on the same committee together, and Lee and I had many, many conversations in committee and in the hallways, and like we're talking about school choice. Lee, myself, all the representatives, Michelle, all of us from the Northeast Kingdom, we got in a big group and we just stood in the hallway and we talked it out. And I can say that I have that rapport with just not the Republicans, but the independents, the progressives, everybody that's over there. You've got to be able and willing to listen, to communicate, and to compromise, or you're never going to get anything done over there.
No, it's clear that even if both Scott and I won, or both Bob and Michelle, still there's going to be a requirement for all of us to be able to cross party lines, to be able to work with both sides, because you're right, we do have a legislature that I think by and large is looking out for the best interests of Vermonters, but obviously do have a different perspective. And clearly, though, when I go up there, I'm not going up there with an R, I'm going up there as the representative of St. Johnsbury. And so obviously, because I'm a Republican, there's certain ideals and principles that I stand for. By and large, again, the reason I'm there is because I'm representing you. And so what makes the most sense for St. Johnsbury? I'm going to be working with Republicans and Democrats and progressives alike to ensure that what is done is best for St. Johnsbury.
Yeah, I mean, you have to work with both parties. I mean, it's if you want to get something done for St. Johnsbury, if you want to be an ideological partisan, you guess you can hang out with your own party. I mean, Vermont has a great tradition of bipartisanship. Maybe not in the last 10 years, but for many years, we had House speakers that were from the minority party and committee chairs that were from the minority party. So I think we're a little more civil than the rest of the nation is. And I really look forward to serving with people from a different party or a different part of my state. And hey, if I don't like them, and what's the old adage? Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. So.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back to the panel, but I'm just going to throw in one of my questions. This time I'm just going to have you say yes or no, make it quick. The question's actually going to be longer than the answer. So we had a situation in the state where we had a teacher strike in South Burlington, and it cost the school about 4 days. And so my question is this, yes or no? Would you support banning teacher strikes in the state of Vermont? I'm not sure whose turn it is.
We had it when we went to the audience, so
Yeah,
I don't mind going first.
I'll go first, huh?
Yeah.
Janssen, let's go with Janssen.
Yes. I would be.
No.
Should we say it together? No.
Thank you.
Well, I want to address this. I mean, it's not a simple yes or no question.
Well, that's what I wanted it to be, Bob.
Well,
You can explain it to your constituents after.
all right.
Thanks. Okay, Ranny, go ahead with your question, please.
Okay, this is about, what is your position on the, oh, sorry. Hope I'm loud enough, but just in case.
Yeah. What is your position on education issues that will arise in the legislature this year, including consolidation of school districts, support for small schools, and hold harmless provisions for schools with decreasing enrollments?
Well, I think the biggest issue is going to be funding, and I'm not in favor of consolidation of school districts. I'm not convinced that that's going to save any money, and I think that should be a local issue. If it does become expensive for the local towns, then if they can pay for that expense if they think that's valuable for them. And then regarding the decreasing enrollments, I mean, we're a total an anomaly. We have an increasing enrollment, and we need to get a handle on the towns that have seen 20 to 30% of their students go away. Their expenses continue to increase, and now they're upwards of $20,000 per pupil, and some of that cost is getting transferred over onto the districts that are actually being responsible, and in our case has an increasing student population. I think that really needs to be addressed. I don't think that's people, I think the governor right now thinks it's, he has his, gives a speech and says all the school districts will control their spending this year and they'll keep it below 2%, and they're all just thumbing their nose at him because they can read education law, they know exactly what the funding formula is, and the funding formula needs to be tweaked.
So I answer this question two ways. I mean, I represent St. Johnsbury, and St. Johnsbury doesn't have a small school, and our tax rate is being impacted by the benefits that are extended to small schools in the state. However, I also recognize that part of Vermont's charm and what attracts people to come here is our rural nature and our small communities, and so it's one of those very sticky challenges that can't be answered very neatly in a minute and a half. But I did vote against the school consolidation bill last year. I favor local conversations. I favor putting more of the pressure on communities to figure out what they're willing to spend to educate their kids. Where it gets sticky is when there's a small community that's decided they can't afford to keep doing it the way they're doing it, but they can't get anyone to partner with them. And there's actually cases in the state where that's happening. So, statewide, we need to get creative. We need to provide more incentives for districts to look at ways to join forces, to use technology to both keep their spending down, but also to make sure that kids in all those small towns have the same access to learning opportunities that we have in larger towns.
Again, I agree with Michelle that, this isn't a minute and a half question, but I agree, I don't support school consolidation. And I think that Michelle hit it right on the head that there are some small schools that can't afford it, but there's nobody for them to go with. So, I have thought long and hard about this, and I know in the capital bill we have a fund that we use for school construction. Is there a way, and just thinking outside the box, is there possibly a way to take the school funding and somehow break that out, that we can help the small schools for not ever, but like, 2, 4, 6 years, something like that, and ease that burden for them as they're going into this. But that's just a thought I had. But we're going to need that. We're going to need to think outside the box. We're going to have to help these few small schools that can't do it. But we're definitely not supportive of school consolidation.
Mr. Ranny, I did touch on this earlier as well. Again, yeah, I do not support consolidation. I do agree that I don't believe that just consolidating schools and making them bigger and grander with greater bureaucracy and less local control is actually going to make them cheaper. In fact, I think in many ways we can see that it might make it more expensive when you allow bureaucracies to grow unseemly. I mean, we see that. Quite frankly, I think we can see that now even with someone care. So it's too expensive. But I did, and I apologize, what was the second half of, because I know after consolidation you had a follow-up question.
Support for small schools and hold harmless provisions for schools with decreasing enrollment.
Yes, and my understanding again, at least with the decreasing enrollment, so that way if it happens too rapidly, they don't get the punch so heavily. No, and I do agree with that because obviously schools can't necessarily control that either. I mean, there's other factors involved with that. So I do believe we have to ease that burden. But again, it does go back to the point we can't do it forever either. So gradually, then the difference is going to have to be made up somewhere.
Thank you. Yeah, it would be Michelle. Is there an audience member with a question? Anybody? We're running out of time. This could be Dave.
My question is, how are you going to, when you go over there to represent us, are you going to prevent the state of Vermont from going bankrupt?
So Vermont, as I understand it, is one of the states that isn't required to do a balanced budget, but we do every year. And we have a very strong bond rating thanks to the excellent work of our state treasurer. I don't think we're at any risk of going bankrupt.
Yeah, and Michelle hit it right on the head. I mean, the state of Vermont's not going to go bankrupt. We do have that AAA bond rating, so we have funds where we're able to access money. But the one thing is we always pass a balanced budget, and that's the hard work from whoever you're going to send over to Mount Pillier. The Appropriations Committee, Jane Kitchell, her group, the House Appropriations Committee with Kitty Toll on it, they all do a wonderful job. We all work together, and at the end of the day, we may agree, disagree, but we always come out with a balanced budget.
I do believe that we have to get our budget in control, though, and growing the capital budget each and every year is not sustainable. And I think that is likely where the concern is going. And so that's why I do believe that we have to have a tax structure that is more equitable and also transparent, but also to not tax citizens any more than what is absolutely essential for basic necessities. And the things that are essential for government. And I talked about this in our previous forum. And that begins with education, public safety, and infrastructure. Those are the requirements of our state. Then after that, then we do have to take a harder look of where our money's going and whether or not we really can afford those additional services.
The state of Vermont spending, it's on an unsustainable path right now. Since 2008, our spending has increased at triple the rate of inflation. I've proposed two things. One is the two pressures on the budget every year, of course, are inflation and population growth. We should keep for future spending increases for at least the foreseeable future, say 5 years, a couple percent underneath those pressures, and try to get this thing back on an even keel. And then the other thing is that we really need to look at revenue growth given our existing tax structure. In many ways, it's regressive. It doesn't acknowledge the changes in the marketplace, and we could do some things to really increase the economic growth, the population growth in this state, that would just be a natural growth in revenue that would take a lot of the pressure off these tax increases every year. So, I mean, it is unsustainable right now, and we're going to have to look at fiscal discipline and look at some more progressive tax strategies that will actually grow our economy instead of cause our economy to erode.
Okay, thank you. Coming down to the end, it looks like, Seleem, you're going to have the final question of the night. Make it a good one.
So I get the final question. So what do you see as the most serious health problems in St. J and our state?
The most serious health issue or problem, the most health problem. I think we talked a little bit about it tonight. I think is getting quality doctors, nurses, and medical staff to treat the citizens here in St. Johnsbury. And I think one thing that I see is for children. I think that we have a lot of children that need extra medical attention. And I think that I would like to see more of that. And just in healthcare in general, as far as, there's different diseases that I think probably need a little more attention to, but all in all, I think it's just, looking after our children.
And again, if your question is going to actually the health problem and like what illnesses are the greatest, quite frankly, I can't give you the answer. I'm not a physician, but I can agree with the fact that I think over large having access to the broad range of treatments and the resources needed to handle the vast arrays of problems that St. Johnsbury and local residents have is important. I do give, again, credit to our hospital because it does have extensive services available, but obviously not everything that can be treated locally. And I think that's also just an aspect of the population and the demographic that our hospital serves as well, though, because I mean we do just have a few thousand people in our community, and so we're not going to have a mass general hospital here that's going to be able to have every modern advance known to mankind. But I do think that it is a challenge that was spoke on earlier of ensuring that for the services that we provide, that we do have the very best providers possible.
My concerns are affordability. My concerns are having the people actually in place to service our population. And the demographics are really scary. When you look at the age of our population, I think aren't we the oldest state in the nation right now? I've heard that. And the demographics, it's getting older. And we really, I mean, those are forces that there aren't enough taxpayers in this state to overcome all of that. And we really need to have some serious economic development in this state to address this demographic trend, because it's not going to end up good the way it is right now.
I'm going to answer your question a slightly different way and talk about some actual health concerns, which and some ways that I think our community is addressing them outside of sort of government intervention. And I mean, obesity is talked about extensively at the State House, and we struggle with what kind of policy interventions make sense. And there's a lot of, and I'll tell you, the tax on sugar-sweetened beverages that was proposed when Bob and I did a town meeting survey in my first year. That was the thing that had the most resistance. Nobody in this town wants their soda taxed more than it is, or maybe it's, I don't know, anyway. So that's a policy intervention, but what I'm seeing in our community, which is incredibly heartening, is a commitment from the hospital and from the academy and from the rec department. We have a tremendous rec department director, to getting people to look at how they can take control of their own health and get active. The revitalization of the old mill is a fantastic happening in our community, and even, the trails at NVRH, NVRH's role in the LVRT. I think those are the things we need to do. We need to be encouraging people to eat well. We have tremendous agricultural resources not far from us that we should be tapping into more.
10 seconds.
And just encouraging people to move.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming out tonight for this forum. The candidates will be sticking around for a few minutes after if you have any other questions. There are a bunch of questions that went unasked, and thank you for your hard work, panelists. I know you had a lot more to say. But you certainly could take the time to visit with them individually, ask additional questions, and you have 12 days to track them down after tonight. So due diligence, remember to vote on November 4th, and thank you for coming. Also, I'm sorry, one last thing. KATV is videotaping this. KATV people, do you have a schedule of broadcasts when this might be? No. Okay. We'll have to, we'll try to get that information and put it in the newspaper for you guys. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.